There comes a point in life where you stop asking for permission to be great, where you stop shrinking just to make others comfortable. When you've been lied to, underestimated, passed over, and played, there's a fire that gets lit inside you. And that fire, it doesn't beg, it doesn't explain, it doesn't announce, it dominates. Some of you out there, you've been sitting on your brilliance because you didn't want to upset people who were never rooting for you to begin with. But today, you learned the rules. Today, you play the game to win. Let them talk. Let them doubt you. Let them think you don't see what they're trying to pull. Because the most dangerous man in the room is the one who watches in silence, then moves with precision. You don't have to scream. You don't have to threaten. You just have to learn how to outthink, outlast, and outclass everyone trying to control the board. You ready? Then lock in. These are the 8 rules for total dominance. And if you learn them, really learn them, not only will you outsmart anyone, you'll never be outplayed again. There is something powerful about being unpredictable, something magnetic about the person who walks into the room, quiet, calm, unreadable. They don't blurt everything out. They don't need to convince you of who they are. They don't explain their every move, their every thought. They move with intention, speak with restraint, and their presence alone demands attention. That's the strength of mystery. When people don't know what's in your hand, they can't play against you. When you become too easy to read, you become easy to manipulate. You hand over your power piece by piece, just by oversharing, just by over-explaining. Mystery isn't about deception. It's about self-protection. It's not about hiding who you are. It's about reserving pieces of yourself for people who have earned the right to see them. You don't owe everyone your blueprint. Some people only want your information so they can use it against you. Keep them guessing. Keep them uncertain. That's how you stay in control. In this world, you have to understand clarity is a luxury and not everyone deserves it. You show your heart to the wrong person, they'll exploit it. You expose your plan to the wrong listener, they'll sabotage it. There's a wisdom in keeping some things close to the chest. Not everything needs to be posted. Not everything needs to be told. Sometimes the best power move is silence. Sometimes letting others wonder what you're thinking, what you're planning, or what motivates you is the exact strategy that keeps you 10 steps ahead. Mystery keeps your enemies confused and your allies curious. When they can't define you, they can't box you in. The unknown becomes your advantage. They can't prepare for what they can't predict. And in a world obsessed with broadcasting every move, your restraint becomes revolutionary. We live in a time where people confuse vulnerability with visibility. They think openness is power. And yes, vulnerability is powerful when it's given intentionally, not casually. When you start exposing your wounds to everyone, they stop respecting your strength. When you talk about every struggle before it's processed, before it's healed, you invite people to see you as broken instead of resilient. That's why mystery is not avoidance, it's discipline. It's understanding that there is a time and place for disclosure, and it's not in every room you enter. It's not in every conversation you have. Keep something for yourself. You are not obligated to narrate your entire journey while you're still walking through it. Silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. They want to know your fears so they can control you. They want to know your desires so they can bait you. They want to know your next step so they can block you. But when you're unpredictable, you become untouchable. They don't know how to move because you haven't moved the way they expected. That's why you never show all your cards, not in relationships, not in business, not in life. Show enough to keep them watching, but never enough to give them the whole playbook. Keep your true intentions guarded. Keep your full capacity hidden until it's too late for them to stop it. That's how dominance works. Quiet preparation, sudden execution. It's human nature to want to be seen, to want to be known. We all crave recognition. But there's a difference between being seen and being exposed. If you need constant validation, you become a puppet to the approval of others. But when you're rooted in your worth, you don't need to prove anything. You don't need to broadcast your every win. You let your actions speak in volumes. Silence never had to explain. The loudest people in the room often have the least control. The most dominant minds know when to speak and when to vanish. They let others speculate while they strategize. They move like shadows, rarely seen, never ignored. Think of a lion in the wild. It doesn't roar before it attacks. It doesn't announce its intentions. It stalks in silence, calculates the distance, and then strikes with absolute precision. You must learn to move like that. Every thought doesn't need to be spoken. Every emotion doesn't need to be shared. Control your narrative by limiting your exposure. Let them make assumptions. Let them get it wrong. That miscalculation, that's your edge. That's what gives you leverage when the moment comes to act. They'll think you're not ready. They'll think you're unsure. And when you rise, when you make your move, it'll be too late for them to stop it. Even in your relationships, learn the strength of restraint. Emotional control is one of the most overlooked forms of power. If they know exactly what triggers you, they own you. If they know what you're afraid of, they have a handle on you. But if you stay grounded, composed, and unreadable, they have no weapon against you. That doesn't mean you become cold or disconnected. It means you remain conscious of what you reveal and to whom. You share your depths with those who have shown they can handle it, not with those who haven't earned it. You don't just protect your secrets, you protect your soul. Power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's subtle. It's in the way you don't react when provoked, in the way you choose your words carefully, in the way you smile without revealing what's behind it. That's mystery. That's control. And it's a choice. Every time you feel the urge to explain yourself, ask why. Ask if it's to clarify or to please. Ask if it's to connect or to control the way someone perceives you. Because if your peace depends on how someone interprets your silence, you've already given them too much power. Sometimes silence is the final word. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. The game changes when you stop needing people to understand your process. When you stop needing approval to move forward. When you stop giving everyone access to your mind. That's when you begin to dominate. Because while they're reacting emotionally, you're calculating outcomes. While they're broadcasting their every thought, you're editing yours. While they're playing checkers with their words, you're playing chess. The person who can't be predicted cannot be controlled. And that's why mystery is your armor. It protects your focus. It protects your energy. It protects your rock. There's something deeply powerful about being underestimated. When you keep your goals quiet, they can't be sabotaged. When you keep your knowledge hidden, they don't know how sharp you are until it's too late. Mystery allows you to prepare without interference. It allows you to grow without distraction. You're not hiding, you're building. You're not retreating, you're recalibrating. You're not passive. The less they know, the less they can damage. The more you preserve your mind, the more unstoppable your moves become. Strategy lives in secrecy. Power lives in privacy. So when they ask you what you're working on, smile and say, you'll see. When they wonder what you're thinking, say, just observing. When they push for answers, give them silence. Because silence will tell them more than words ever could. Silence says you're not here to impress, you're here to win. You're not here to be seen, you're here to build something they can't touch. You're not here to entertain their curiosity, you're here to protect your mission. Mystery isn't about pretending to be someone you're not. It's about never allowing someone to disarm who you are. Let them talk, let them assume, let them create narratives in their heads. Your job isn't to correct their imagination. Your job is to live so effectively that by the time they understand your silence, you've already surpassed their noise. Because when you master the art of keeping people guessing, you master the game. When you move with discipline, with clarity, and with purpose, but keep your motives hidden, you become a force no one can prepare for. And the most powerful man in any room is the one no one can figure out. When life hits you hard, when people come at you with insults, betrayal, chaos, and games, your emotions are the first battlefield. The world will try to shake you. People will test you, situations will frustrate you, and things will happen that seem completely unfair. But the moment you hand over your emotional control, you hand over your power, you give others the steering wheel to your state of mind. If someone else can control how you feel, how you react, how you move, then they control you. Mastery doesn't begin with your outer world. It begins within. It begins with how you process pain, how you manage pressure, how you sit with your emotions without becoming a slave to them. Emotional control is not denial, it's discipline. It's not about ignoring how you feel. It's about understanding that your emotions are messengers, not masters. They will say things just to get a rise out of you. They'll provoke you, bait you, corner you. Because if they can make you act out of character, they win. People will study your weaknesses. If they know what angers you, they'll use it. If they know what scares you, they'll press on it. That's why the most dangerous thing you can be is calm. Calm in the face of disrespect. Calm when chaos erupts. Calm when they expect you to crumble. That calm, that's control. That's power. Because the man who cannot be triggered is the man who cannot be manipulated. And that kind of discipline takes work. It takes self-awareness. It takes learning to pause before you respond. It takes rewiring the impulse to lash out and instead learning how to respond, not react. There's strength in silence. Not the silence of avoidance, but the silence that speaks of deep composure. The kind that doesn't let the outside noise disturb the inner sanctuary. You see, everyone wants to be powerful, but few are willing to master their own mind. Everyone wants to lead, but few want to lead themselves. Your emotions are like wild horses. If you let them run freely without direction, they will trample everything in their path, including your peace, your purpose, and your reputation. But if you train them, if you harness them, if you guide them, they'll carry you further than you've ever imagined. Controlling your emotions is not about suppressing your humanity. It's about elevating it. When someone insults you, what do? Do you clap back? Do you raise your voice? Do you go on defense? That's the reaction they want. That's the trap, because the moment you respond emotionally, they get the reaction they needed to stay in control. But when you pause, when you take a breath and decide not to respond from the same low energy, you take your power back. That's the kind of energy that commands respect. Not because you're loud, but because you're unbothered. Your strength is in your stillness. The person who learns how to respond with clarity rather than react with rage is the person who becomes a master in any room they walk into. Think about how much damage has been done in your life from speaking too quickly, from acting out of anger, from letting your emotions drive your decisions. Regret is often born in the moments we allowed emotions to hijack reason, but wisdom is born in restraint. In taking a step back and asking, is this worth my peace? Is this worth my energy? Is this worth my future? That pause, those few seconds of clarity can save years of regret. You don't owe everyone a reaction. You don't need to prove your strength through yelling or showing aggression. Real strength is quiet. It's measured. It's rooted. And it shows up when you refuse to let anything or anyone pull you out of alignment. They say you can't control what happens to you, and that's true. But you can control how you interpret it, how you allow it to shape you. Every hardship, every setback, every insult can either be fuel or poison, and it all depends on how you emotionally process it. If you take it personally, you suffer. If you take it strategically, you grow. You shift from victim to visionary. You start seeing attacks as data. You start seeing disrespect as lessons. You start seeing your emotions not as obstacles, but as indicators. Indicators of where your healing still needs work, where your ego still needs pruning, where your discipline still needs sharpening. People love to see a reaction, especially when they don't respect you. They feed off the drama. They feed off your triggers. But when you give them nothing, when you stay composed, they become powerless because they don't know what bothers you. They don't know if they reached you. And that mystery, that silence, it shifts the balance of power instantly. You don't have to scream to prove your strength. You don't have to retaliate to show you're not weak. Sometimes walking away without saying a word speaks louder than any argument ever could. It says, I don't need to fight to win. I already won when I chose my peace over your chaos. Look at the greatest leaders. The most respected minds, the most influential people, what do they all have in common? Emotional control. They don't panic under pressure. They don't let fear dictate their decisions. They don't lash out when criticized. They observe, they assess, then they move. Because they know emotion without direction is a weapon against your own purpose. But emotion with clarity, that's fire. That's focus. That's a force that can break through walls without ever breaking down. You're not meant to be numb, but you're also not meant to be ruled by every impulse that hits you. Emotional mastery means you feel everything, but you react with wisdom. Sometimes people will come at you just to test your limits. They want to see if they can get under your skin. And the truth is, most of them don't even care about the issue. They just want to see if they can control your state. But when they realize that nothing they say can shake you, nothing they do can throw you off, you become something rare. You become intimidating in a way that has nothing to do with how you look or how much you speak, and you become dangerous. Because the man who cannot be moved emotionally is the man no one can manipulate mentally. There's a maturity that comes with emotional control, a kind of quiet dominance that turns chaos into calculation. You stop reacting out of ego and you start responding with intention. You no longer let anger blind you. You let it inform you. You no longer let fear stop you. You let it sharpen you. You no longer let pain define you. You let it shape you. That kind of power changes everything. It changes how you walk into a room, how you deal with conflict, how you handle betrayal. You stop fighting for control over people and start claiming control over yourself. Your emotions are not your enemy. They're just not meant to drive the car. They are there to alert you, not steer you. To signal something, pain, fear, hope, love, but not to be confused with the voice of truth. You must learn to pause and ask, what's really going on here? Is it fear talking? Is it pride? Is it past trauma? Or is it something deeper? When you learn to listen before reacting, feel before judging, pause before responding, that's when you've stepped into mastery. That's when you've evolved from being reactive to being intentional. There is freedom in that level of self-command. You stop being everyone's puppet. You stop letting life's random storms drown your peace. You stop being defined by what happens to you and start defining what happens within you. That's real freedom. That's real dominance. And it doesn't scream, doesn't need to be seen, it just moves. Calm, focused, unwavering. Because emotional mastery doesn't show itself in how loud you fight. It shows in how steady you stand. There's something profoundly powerful about the one who sits in silence, watching, listening, absorbing everything. In a world that celebrates noise, the observer stands out. Not because they demand attention, but because they understand it. They know that real power isn't about being the loudest voice in the room, but being the most aware presence in it. When you learn to observe everything and say very little, you begin to notice patterns others miss. You hear what people truly mean, not just what they say. You see beneath the surface. You spot the shifts in energy, the contradictions, the nervous laughter, the subtle glances. Because silence sharpens your perception. And perception, realigning for perception, is how you gain control of any environment. People will show you exactly who they are if you give them enough space to speak. Let them talk. Let them explain, justify, overshare, and reveal. The more you stay silent, the more comfortable they get filling that silence. And in those moments, truth slips out. Inconsistencies appear. You don't need to interrogate people to understand them. You just need to give them time. Most people are so busy trying to prove themselves that they reveal everything about their intention. But the wise man doesn't interrupt. He lets people expose themselves without even realizing it. That's the art of observation, letting the truth surface on its own. When you're always talking, you're not learning. When you're always reacting, you're not processing. Most people speak to be heard, not to understand. They're already thinking about their next reply while you're still speaking. But when you train yourself to listen deeply, not just to words, but to tone, pauses, deflections, you begin to see people clearly. And once you see them clearly, you can navigate any situation with precision. You can protect your peace. You can spot hidden agendas. You can feel when someone's lying, manipulating, or trying to influence your decisions. Silence is your shield. Observation is your sword. The best chess players aren't loud. They're calculating. They study the board, their opponent's moves, the timing of every decision. You must learn to do the same with people. When you walk into a room, observe before you engage. Watch how people interact, who commands attention, who avoids eye contact, who speaks with confidence, and who tries too hard. These are not just social cues. They're data. And data, when used correctly, becomes strategy. You start making informed decisions. You stop wasting energy on the wrong people. You stop engaging in battles that don't deserve your fire. It's easy to miss the truth when you're always the one talking. You can't hear the whispers of manipulation, the subtle disrespect, the envy hiding behind a compliment if you're too busy speaking. But when you become the quiet presence in the room, the one who doesn't rush to share, who doesn't need to be seen, you start to notice what others miss. People begin to underestimate you. And that's a gift. Because when they think you're not paying attention, they let their guard down. That's when you see who they truly are. That's when you collect the truth without confrontation. Emotions plow judgment. And when you're too busy reacting, you're not thinking. But observation requires stillness. It demands emotional discipline. You have to be present. You have to be calm. You can't pick up on details when your mind is racing. You can't read between the lines when you're focused on defending yourself. That's why the ability to observe is so rare, because it requires you to quiet the noise within, not just the noise around you. But once you master that, once you train yourself to stay still and just watch, you become someone no one can fool. There is a kind of quiet confidence that grows inside of you when you start seeing people for who they are, not who they pretend to be. You stop needing explanations. You stop chasing closure. You stop getting blindsided because your eyes are always open. Your ears are always tuned in. You become harder to deceive, harder to manipulate. People won't understand how you know what you know, but you'll know. You'll feel it in the way they shift when confronted, in the way their energy changes around certain topics. Your silence becomes a mirror. It reflects everything they try to hide. In relationships, both personal and professional, observation is your greatest weapon. You'll start to see patterns. How someone treats you when they need something versus when they don't. How they respond to your boundaries. How they react when you win. These things are easy to miss when you're caught up in emotion. But when you slow down and just watch, everything becomes clear. And once you see a pattern, believe it. Don't argue with reality. Don't try to explain it away. Don't fill the silence with excuses. Let your observation speak. Let it guide your decisions. Let it show you who deserves your time and who. People often confuse silence with weakness. They think if you're not speaking up, you're not aware. But the most powerful presence in any space is often the one who says the least. Because that person is studying. That person is listening to more than just words. They're listening to energy. They're sensing motives. They're processing behaviors. They're seeing through facades. And when they do speak, their words hit harder. Because when someone rarely speaks, every word carries weight. Every sentence lands with purpose. That's why people who observe more and speak less command so much respect. When they do talk, people pay attention. When you speak less, you also protect your energy. You avoid arguments that drain you. You escape unnecessary conflict. You don't get caught in emotional traps because you're not reacting, you're reading. Reading the room, reading the person, reading the moment. And in that stillness, you're always one step ahead. The loudest person in the room might win attention, but the quietest often wins control. Because while others are busy trying to be heard, you're busy understanding what matters. And when you understand deeply, you move strategically, you move powerfully. Observation teaches you patience. It teaches you restraint. You learn to wait for the right moment. You stop forcing things. You stop trying to fix people who've already shown you who they are. You stop chasing clarity from those who've already revealed their truth in 100 subtle ways. Silence allows you to process. Observation gives you vision. And vision, you can't lose when you see everything. You can't be caught off guard when you're always watching. Life becomes a chessboard, and you're no longer just reacting to the moves, you're predicting them. That's what separates the masters from the masses. The ability to sit back, absorb every detail, connect the dots, and strike only when it counts. Not every battle is yours to fight. Not every comment is yours to respond to. But every interaction, every moment, that's your classroom. That's your training ground. Observation sharpens you, it refines you, and eventually it elevates you. When you speak too much, you reveal your weaknesses. You show your desires, your fears, your insecurities. But when you say very little, people don't know what moves you. They can't read your angle. They can't predict your next step. And in that uncertainty, you become powerful, because unpredictability is protection. And when people can't label you, they can't limit you. They can't use your own words to box you in. You stay in control, not by dominating the room, but by mastering it from the shadows. Watching, listening, calculating. That's how real dominance is built. That's how legacy is formed, in silence, in stillness, in mastery of observation. They'll try to make you rush, to force a quick answer, to demand an instant reaction, because pressure makes people impulsive. And impulsiveness leads to mistakes. That's the trap. That's the game they play. If they can control your pace, they can control your power. But when you slow down, when you take a breath and hold your ground, you strip that control away. You reclaim your authority. Because time, when used with discipline, becomes a weapon. The person who moves with intention, who doesn't let the chaos outside disturb the calm inside, becomes a force that others can't manipulate. The one who controls the pace controls the outcome. Most people are so afraid of being misunderstood or left behind that they rush to respond, rush to please, rush to act without thinking. But that rush leads to regret. It leads to misjudgments and bad decisions. Your strength comes not just from what you do, but from how and when you do it. When someone puts you in a corner and says, you need to decide now, that's a red flag. That's not urgency. It's manipulation. That's not opportunity. It's pressure disguised as importance. And the moment you allow someone to set your pace, you give them the power to steer your direction. You don't have to react immediately just because someone demands it. You don't have to give an answer today just because they said it's urgent. You have the right to pause, to think, to breathe. You're not weak for asking for time. You're wise. You're strategic. Because pressure decisions are rarely made from clarity. They're made from fear. And fear will always rush you into places you don't belong, into relationships you should have walked away from, into deals that weren't in your favor, into confrontations that only escalated things further. When you slow it down, you see things you would have missed. You hear truth between the words. You notice motives beneath the surface. Think about how many times you said yes when you should have said no simply because you felt rushed. Think about how many times you ignored your gut because you were pressured to move fast. That's why pacing is power. When you move too fast, you trip. When you move too slow, you miss chances. But when you move with discernment, when your actions align with your internal rhythm and not the external noise, you become unstoppable. You're not reacting to pressure. You're choosing from peace. And that peace creates precision. That peace puts you in control of not just your time, but your future. People will test your boundaries through urgency. They'll knock on your door with last-minute expectations, unplanned demands, and manufactured emergencies, hoping you'll abandon your standards just to solve their chaos. But you don't have to respond to everything immediately. You don't owe instant access to your mind, your energy, or your decisions. The more control you have over your pace, the more respect you command from others. Not because you're being difficult, but because you value your clarity. You understand that quality choices require space. They require patience. And you refuse to trade your peace just to meet someone else's deadline. There is wisdom in stillness, the ability to wait, to think, to sit in discomfort without rushing to escape it. That's what separates the mature from the emotional. People will say, you're cold, you're indecisive, you're stalling. Let them say it. Let them misunderstand your delay, because what they don't know is that you're processing, you're calculating, you're checking the angles before you move. That's the trait of warriors, of strategists, of kings. They don't act out of emotion, they act from vision. And vision doesn't come in a rush. It comes in reflection. When you walk into a negotiation, remember this: the person who speaks first often loses leverage. The one who feels the need to fill the silence ends up revealing too much. That's why silence is golden. That's why pause is power. Because when you let others move fast while you move smart, you watch them make mistakes. You see them reveal their hands. You learn what drives them, what scares them, what they're hiding. And all the while, you hold your position. You control the pace, not by force, but by presence. And that presence builds pressure, not on you, but on them. There's a difference between momentum and rushing. Momentum is built on aligned action. Rushing is built on panic. When you control your pace, you start creating from power, not from fear. You take deliberate steps, not desperate ones. That kind of movement lasts. That kind of strategy leads to longevity, because you're not moving just to move. You're moving with purpose. You're not making noise, you're making impact. And the quieter your steps, the louder your results. That's how dominance is built. Not through loud declarations, but through quiet precision and unshakable control over your own timing. Pressure is a tactic. Whether in business, relationships, or life, people will pressure you to make quick choices because they don't want you to think. They don't want you to reflect. They want a yes before you realize it should have been a no. They want a reaction before you gather the full picture. But when you recognize that, you take your power back. You learn to say, I'll get back to you. You learn to respond, not react. And that shift, that 1 second pause, separates the wise from the reckless, the powerful from the panicked. That's the gap where greatness lives, in that moment of decision made on your terms. Sometimes the strongest move you can make is not moving, sitting still while everyone else scrambles, letting others make the first move, letting their panic reveal their position. Meanwhile, you remain grounded, steady, centered. You know what you bring to the table. You don't rush to prove it. You don't chase urgency. You create opportunity. And when you speak, when you finally move, it's with force, because it wasn't rushed. It was refined. And that refinement gives you the edge they never saw coming. You didn't fold under pressure. You controlled the pace. You ran the clock. And now it's your game. You'll notice something about the most successful people. They're rarely in a rush. Their actions are steady. Their words are measured. Their responses are thoughtful. That's not because they don't feel urgency. It's because they've trained themselves to think clearly under pressure. They've learned that every time they let someone else dictate their pace, they lose a piece of their freedom. But when they control the tempo, they become the rhythm others must follow. That's power. That's leadership. Not through force, but through consistency, calm, and command of your own pace. You don't have to move just because someone else is moving fast. You don't have to match their energy. Sometimes your slow and steady pace is exactly what protects your vision. Sometimes taking that extra day, that extra pause, saves you from a lifetime of wrong choices. That patience, that restraint, that ability to stand still in a rushing world, that's not laziness, that's maturity. That's awareness, because not every fire needs your water. Not every opportunity is aligned with your purpose. Not every urgent request deserves your immediate attention. The wise man knows the value of timing. Control the pace and you control the game. Control the pace and you become immune to manipulation. Control the pace and your actions become more than reactions. They become blueprints. Strategic, intentional, unstoppable blueprints that others begin to study, follow, and fear. Because you're no longer moving out of pressure, you're moving from purpose. And when you move from purpose, you become a master of direction, not just a victim of speed. That's what sets leaders apart from followers. Not how fast they run, but how well they pace their power. Let them look at you and think you're nothing special. Let them size you up and assume you're not a threat. Let them laugh, overlook you, and whisper your name like it's a joke. That's where your power starts. In their doubt, in their comfort, in their assumption that you're not capable of rising above them. Because when people underestimate you, they show you their true self. They don't guard themselves. They speak too freely. They reveal what they're planning. They let you get close because they think you're harmless. That's your edge. That's your moment. While they're looking past you, you're learning, you're building. You're plotting a rise they never saw coming, because nothing is more dangerous than a quiet warrior with a sharp mind and a long memory. Being underestimated gives you freedom. It lets you move through rooms without resistance. It lets you plan without suspicion. No one's watching you too closely, so you can study everything. While they're performing, you're preparing. While they're basking in their own noise, you're sharpening in silence. They think you're not smart enough to notice. They think you're not bold enough to strike. But that's exactly what makes you lethal. Because your silence makes them careless. They think you're asleep, but you're wide awake. Watching, learning, remembering. And when the time comes, you'll act. Not with noise, but with force. Sometimes the greatest disguise is humility. When you're humble, they confuse it for weakness. When you're quiet, they confuse it for insecurity. But humility isn't about believing you're less. It's about knowing you don't need to broadcast your strength. You don't need a stage. You don't need validation. You know what you're capable of. And that's enough. So let them talk, let them doubt. Let them believe you'll stay exactly where they found you. Because every second they spend underestimating you is a second you're gaining ground. That's the beauty of being overlooked. You're not weighed down by expectations. You're free to evolve, to shift, to grow. Uninterrupted. You don't have to defend yourself to anyone who doubts you. You don't have to prove anything to people who have already made up their mind. Their disbelief isn't your burden. It's your fuel. When they doubt you, use it. When they dismiss you, thank them, because they just made your rise easier. You don't owe them your explanations. You owe yourself your evolution. The quiet ones, the ignored ones, the underestimated ones. They're the ones who build the strongest foundation, because they know what it feels like to be disregarded. And they use that pain as a hammer, as a torch, as a tool to keep pushing. It's not your job to convince anyone of your worth. Your worth isn't up for debate. It's not dependent on applause. It's not measured by other people's vision. Most people can't see past their own ego long enough to recognize greatness, especially when it comes wrapped in silence and restraint. They expect power to be loud. They expect strength to announce itself. But real power, it whispers. It watches. It waits. So let them sleep on you. Let them think you've got nothing. Because while they're underestimating your presence, they're overestimating their own security. And that imbalance is what gives you the advantage to strike when it matters most. People will project their limits onto you. They'll try to shrink your dreams down to the size of their own fears. They'll say, you're too quiet, or you don't have enough experience, or you're not ready yet. And they'll say it with conviction as if they've got the final word. But remember, their words aren't prophecy. They're just projections. They don't know your work ethic. They don't know your vision. They don't know the nights you've spent grinding, the sacrifices you've made, or the strength you've developed in silence. Let them believe what they want. Their underestimation is not your ceiling. It's your springboard. Sometimes your silence intimidates people more than your words ever could, because they can't read you. They don't know what you're thinking. They don't know what you're planning. That discomfort, that confusion, that's control. When people don't know what to expect from you, they're always off balance. They hesitate, they overcompensate, and that's when they slip. That's when they make mistakes. And all the while, you stay calm, collected, composed. Let them take center stage. Let them steal the spotlight. Because when you move, you won't need lights. You'll cast your own shadow. Underestimation is a gift when you learn how to use it. It keeps your back against the wall just long enough to learn how to push against it. It teaches you to depend on your own drive, your own mind, your own fire. There's something powerful about being doubted. It forces you to become undeniable. When you're underestimated, you start to crave excellence, not approval. You start to build without asking. You start to walk without waiting. You stop checking if they believe in you, because deep down, you believe in yourself more than they ever could. And that's enough to keep going, even when the world doubts you. Every time someone looked at you and saw not enough, they gave you a little more edge, a little more reason to stay focused, a little more reason to rise. The greatest victories are the ones no one saw coming, the ones that leave them speechless, the ones that force them to go back and question every moment they ignored you, every time they laughed, every time they looked down on you. Let that be your fuel. Let that be your drive. Not to prove them wrong, but to prove yourself right. Because this path isn't about revenge. It's about arrival. It's about becoming everything you were born to be. You don't have to be flashy to be brilliant. You don't have to be loud to be lethal. Some of the most powerful people in history were underestimated. They were the quiet thinkers, the silent planners, the ones who were dismissed until it was too late. That's who you are. You're the storm they never prepared for. You're the shift they didn't expect. They thought you were harmless, forgettable, replaceable, but they didn't know how deeply you were rooted. They didn't know how focused your mind was. They didn't see the hunger in your eyes because they never looked long enough to notice. It's not about being arrogant. It's not about walking around with a chip on your shoulder. It's about knowing your worth without needing it echoed by anyone else. It's about walking into a room like you belong there, even if they don't see it yet, even if they never do. Because your value isn't dependent on being recognized. It's built on consistency, on effort, on quiet daily commitment, the kind no one sees, but everyone eventually feels. That's how legacies are built. Not in moments of applause, but in moments of doubt, when you choose to keep going anyway. So when they laugh, let them. When they doubt, let them. When they skip over your name, let them. You don't need to respond. You don't need to beg for their respect. You're not here for approval. You're here for impact. You're here to move differently, to rise silently, to strike only when it matters. Because your greatest advantage is not in convincing them you're great. It's in letting them think you're not. That's when they let their guard down. That's when they stop watching. That's when you build your throne in the shadows. And by the time they see you, it'll be too late. In a world addicted to noise, those who speak with purpose cut through the static. Most people talk to be heard. They ramble, they overshare, they drown their message in unnecessary details. But the powerful speak to be understood. They speak to move, to lead, to change something. Their words aren't random, they're weapons. Every sentence has a direction. Every phrase carries weight. If you want to outsmart anyone, if you want to walk in total dominance, learn to speak with impact. Learn to weigh your words before they ever leave your mouth. Because once you speak, your words either build your presence or weaken it. You are constantly shaping your identity with your language. Your voice should never be noise. It should be authority. When your words carry clarity, people listen differently. They sit up. They lean in. They pay attention, not because you're shouting, but because what you're saying matters. It's not about using big words or speaking in circles. It's about cutting through the fog. The best communicators don't waste breath. They say what needs to be said and nothing more. They're not trying to sound deep. They're trying to be clear. You don't have to speak often, but when you do, your message must strike. It must land like a hammer. It must leave an imprint. People should leave a conversation with you carrying something they can't shake off. Too many people speak to fill silence. They're uncomfortable with pauses, with tension, with space between words. But silence is where gravity is born. Let your pauses breathe. Let your silence speak for you. Because silence framed by powerful words is more commanding than endless talking. The person who says less but means more becomes unforgettable. When you speak with impact, you don't chase attention, you command it. You don't compete for airtime, you own the moment. And to do that, you must stop speaking impulsively. Start speaking intentionally. Think before you talk. Feel the weight of your own voice before asking others to carry it. Every environment has people who talk just to be heard. And then there's the one who speaks and everything stops. The room quiets. The energy shifts. That person holds the floor not because they demanded it, but because their words carry depth. That's the kind of presence you build when your speech has purpose. You're not scrambling to explain yourself. You're not rambling out of nervousness. You're measured, calm, focused. Because you understand that what you say represents who you are. If your words are cheap, your credibility is too. If your language is reckless, people stop trusting your judgment. But when your words cut through confusion, when they lead instead of linger, your influence grows. The most powerful people aren't always the most educated. They're the most precise. They can summarize a whole argument in one line. They can silence disrespect with a single glance and a phrase. You don't need to dominate the conversation. You just need to master your timing. Timing is everything. When you speak matters just as much as what you say. Say too much, too soon, and you lose leverage. Say too little, too late, and you miss the window. But speak at the right time, with the right tone, and the right message, and you shift the entire room. That's influence. That's dominance. And it's not built on volume, it's built on value. Think about your words as currency. You spend them every time you open your mouth. Some people are broke because they waste their words on complaints, gossip, and meaningless opinions. But the wealthy, those rich in wisdom, purpose, and awareness, speak less, but their words buy impact. They use their voice to build, not break, to lead, not impress, to heal, not wound. If every word you say is recorded and played back to you tomorrow, would it reflect the strength you claim to carry? Would it reflect the future you say you're building? Speaking with impact means you don't throw your words around like they're disposable. You speak as if they echo far beyond the room, because they do. Don't let your voice become background noise. Don't let your speech become forgettable. Speak with conviction. Say things that matter. Say things that carry truth, even if it's uncomfortable, especially if it's uncomfortable. The people who make the greatest changes in the world were never the loudest. They were the clearest. They didn't try to say everything. They said the right things. And that's what you must train yourself to do. Speak with direction, with structure, with restraint. Because too many people talk themselves into weakness, into exposure, into vulnerability. But the one who has learned to speak wisely, sparingly, and sharply, that's the one who holds real power. Don't let emotion hijack your message. Don't let anger dilute your impact. Don't speak just to defend yourself. Speak to define yourself, to assert what matters, to remind others that your voice has purpose. When someone disrespects you, you don't have to shout to make your point. A well-placed sentence delivered with calm clarity often hits harder than rage ever could. Your impact is in your control. You get to decide whether your words build or burn, whether they direct or distract. And when you've mastered that level of control, you're no longer reacting to chaos. You're shaping the atmosphere. Every room you enter is an opportunity to plant something, to leave something behind. So ask yourself before you speak, what am I leaving in this space? Are my words lifting the standard or lowering it? Are they sharpening people or numbing them? Speak as if your words are seeds. Every sentence a future harvest. And if you want to lead, influence, or dominate, your harvest must match your intention. Sloppy words plant confusion. Empty words plant doubt. But impactful words, rooted in wisdom, in truth, plant transformation. They echo long after you've left. They linger in people's minds. That's the power of speaking with substance. Resist the temptation to speak to impress, speak to transform, speak to awaken. You're not here to be trendy with your language. You're here to speak legacy. That means knowing your audience but never shrinking your message. That means knowing when to challenge, when to comfort, and when to stay silent altogether. Master communicators know that sometimes the most powerful message is restraint. They don't get dragged into every debate. They don't get baited by every critic. They know their voice is a tool, and they use it with surgical precision. Speak to win, not just to be right. Speak to lead, not just to be heard. You can tell a lot about someone's mind by the way they speak. Scattered words reflect a scattered mind. Sharp words reflect clarity. Kind words reflect depth. And confident words, spoken without arrogance, reflect alignment. That's the kind of voice that carries through generations, not just in conversations, but in history. So build that voice now. Shape your language. Trim the fat from your speech. Don't let your words wander. Let them walk like soldiers, straight, strong, undeniable. When people speak your name, they should remember what you said, not just how you said it, but how it made them feel. That's legacy. That's weight. That's impact. They want you to react. That's the trap. They want to push your buttons, provoke your emotions, get you to move without thinking. Because when you're emotional, you're exposed. You're vulnerable. You're easier to manipulate. But when you make power moves, not emotional ones, you flip the script. You start controlling the room instead of being controlled by it. Power moves are calculated. They're grounded in logic, vision, and timing. Emotional moves, they're impulsive. They're born from pain, ego, and the need to prove something. The difference between winners and victims often comes down to this: the ability to choose strategy over reaction, purpose over pride. When they hurt you, your first instinct is to lash out, to show them you're not weak, to prove a point. But real power is knowing you don't have to prove anything. You walk away not because you're defeated, but because you've already won by refusing to play their game. The one who can't control their emotions will always lose to the one who can. Making a power move means you rise above the pettiness. You observe the chaos, but you refuse to be a part of it. You know your worth, your vision, and your destination. And nothing, not even betrayal, can pull you off course. Sometimes the loudest emotion isn't anger, it's insecurity. People act out because they're afraid of being misunderstood, overlooked, disrespected. So they shout, they make scenes, they chase validation in ways that backfire. But power moves are rooted in stillness. They're decisions made with a clear head and a calm heart. You don't post your pain online. You don't react to every insult. You don't fight to be right in rooms filled with small minds. You elevate. You detach. You plan your next step in silence while everyone else is busy making noise. That's how real dominance is built. Not by shouting louder, but by thinking sharper. Revenge is an emotional move. Leveling up is a power move. One satisfies your ego, the other secures your future. One leaves you feeling momentarily better, the other rewrites your story permanently. You've got to ask yourself, am I doing this to feed my feelings or to feed my legacy? Emotion can be useful, but only when it's guided by discipline. Power moves are made by people who feel everything, but don't let what they feel dictate what they do. They process the emotion, but they move with wisdom. That's maturity. That's control. That's the difference between playing the short game and owning the board. You don't need to clap back. You don't need to explain. Sometimes your next level is the loudest response. Let them see you win without their help. Let them hear your silence when they expected outrage. Let them wonder how you stayed calm when the fire was raging. That's power. Not because you didn't feel the heat, but because you learned how to use it as fuel. Emotional moves are temporary. They feel good in the moment, but they cost you in the long run. Power moves, they feel slow at first, but they build something permanent. Something that doesn't need constant defense. Think before you speak. Pause before you act. Reflect before you react. That's how power is preserved. You're not here to win every argument. You're here to win the war. And wars aren't won without bursts. They're won with strategy. Emotional people give away their advantage too early. They show their hand, they reveal their wounds. But powerful people, they move like chess players, always thinking 3 steps ahead. They know when to wait, when to walk, when to strike. They're not motivated by the need to be seen. They're moved by the mission to build something that no one can tear down. When someone offends you, take a breath. When someone betrays you, take a step back. When life doesn't go your way, don't panic. Emotional people throw away their progress just to feel better for 5 minutes. But you're not built like that. You've learned to sit in discomfort without being reactive, to feel deeply but not be led blindly. You understand that not every feeling deserves a reaction. that not every conflict deserves your energy. Your peace is too expensive to be traded for temporary satisfaction. Your time is too valuable to waste on petty exchanges. Power moves are about discipline. They're about choosing what serves you long term over what suits you short term. They're about walking away from arguments that don't matter so you can focus on battles that do. They're about saying no even when it's easier to say yes. They're about holding your ground even when your emotions are telling you to fold. The people who make the biggest impact in life aren't the ones who react the most. They're the ones who respond with precision, with clarity, with conviction. They don't let emotion drive the car. They let it sit in the back seat while purpose takes the wheel. It's not about being cold, it's about being clear. Clear on who you are, clear on what you want, clear on what's worth your time. Emotional moves are reactive. They chase closure, revenge, validation. But power moves are proactive. They seek growth, stability, and results. When you walk into a room, you're not looking to prove your worth. You're looking to protect your energy. You're looking to position yourself, not just emotionally survive. That shift in mindset is what separates the impulsive from the impactful. You don't need to be the loudest to win. You just need to be the most disciplined. People will try to provoke you. They'll test your boundaries, your patience, your heart. They'll try to bring you down to their level, where reaction lives and logic dies. But you've trained for this. You've outgrown the need to react to every challenge. Now you choose. You choose when to speak, when to engage, when to respond, and when to rise above. That's how you become untouchable. Not by building walls, but by building standards. Not by closing your heart, but by controlling your focus. That control isn't cold. It's courageous. It means you learn to master yourself before trying to master the world. Let them call you heartless. Let them say you're distant. What they don't know is that you're building. You're focused. You're intentional. And while they're trying to win small emotional battles, you're working in silence on something far greater. You're playing for the future. You're not reactive because you've already decided what matters and what doesn't. That clarity makes you efficient. It makes you magnetic. It makes you powerful in ways emotion alone never could. Power moves come from understanding your mission so clearly that no distraction can pull you away from it. Not even the ones dressed as urgency or offense. There will always be moments when emotion hits first. That's human. But dominance comes when you don't let that first wave determine your next step. You breathe, you analyze, you pivot if needed, and then you move, not out of pain, but out of purpose. Not to be seen, but to create real shift. That's the mark of someone who knows who they are. Someone who's not controlled by mood swings, comments, or temporary chaos. That kind of person doesn't just walk through life. They command it. They shape it. They don't let the noise shake their foundation. Your reputation is built on your patterns, not your moments. One emotional outburst can ruin 10 years of credibility. But one power move can erase 10 years of being overlooked. That's why you stay steady. That's why you move quietly but boldly. Emotion can spark a fire, but only discipline can keep it burning. Your mission is too important to be derailed by petty things. Your vision is too valuable to let temporary emotion become permanent regret. So let emotion knock, but don't let it in. Let it visit, but don't let it live there. Power moves are made when you choose legacy over impulse. Every single time. Build a life so strong, so intentional, so undeniable, that no matter who doubts you, disrespects you, or tries to bury you, they can't ignore what you've become. Build it not with noise, not with desperate attempts for recognition, but with consistency that speaks for itself. Make your daily actions louder than their opinions. When you commit to excellence in silence, you become a threat in every room you walk into, not because you try to intimidate, but because your presence reflects a level of discipline most people can't match. You stop needing to clap back. You stop needing to be seen. Your results do the talking. And no matter how they feel about you, they have no choice but to respect what you've built. Undeniability doesn't come from talent alone. It comes from showing up every single day when no one is watching. It comes from mastering the boring, from perfecting the basics, from staying locked in while others are looking for shortcuts. It's about building a structure so stable that even when storms come, because they always do, you don't bend, you don't break. They'll talk, they'll hate, they'll try to distract you, but when you've built yourself from the ground up, brick by brick, their noise becomes background music to your mission. You keep moving because you've decided this life will speak for itself. You become undeniable when your work ethic becomes immune to excuses. When your name becomes attached to consistency. When people think of you and all they see is results. That's how you remove yourself from being just another person with potential and step into a class of your own. You stop waiting for someone to open the door and start building your own. You stop asking for a seat at the table and start carving one out for yourself with your own hands. And in doing that, you develop a reputation that reaches rooms before you even enter. Not because you asked for it, but because you earned it through relentless discipline and quiet sacrifice. There's nothing louder than the life of someone who didn't quit. Someone who kept going when it got tough. Someone who didn't fold when it got lonely. That's what makes you untouchable, not because you avoided pain, but because you learned how to work through it. Every setback became fuel. Every doubt became direction. Every moment of silence, every season of being overlooked, those became your training ground. That's when you sharpened your vision. That's when you got clear on your why. While others were distracted by attention, you were focused on foundation. And that foundation, that's what keeps you solid when the applause fades. You don't build an undeniable life by following the crowd. You build it by separating yourself, by doing what they won't, by sacrificing what they can't. You get up earlier, you stay later, you learn more, you outwork yesterday's version of you every single day. That's the competition, not them, but you. And when you win that battle, day after day, something begins to change. You start moving different, thinking different. You're no longer trying to prove your worth because you're too busy living it. People begin to notice, but by then it's too late for them to catch up. You've built too much. You've climbed too far, and you're not slowing down. The most powerful part of being undeniable is that it removes the need for validation. You no longer crave applause. You no longer depend on approval, because what you've built isn't based on opinion. It's rooted in action. It's in the hours you put in when no one else believed. It's in the courage you showed when you had every reason to quit. That kind of life doesn't need defense. It's self-evident. It speaks through impact, through peace, through the way you walk into rooms, no longer needing to be accepted because you know what you carry. And when someone tries to challenge you, it doesn't shake you, because you've built this life on real, unshakable ground. When you build something undeniable, the same people who laughed will try to copy. The same ones who ignored you will start to study you. But by then you've evolved. You're not the same. You've outgrown their doubt. You've outpaced their expectations. You've created something they can't touch. Not because you flaunted it, but because you focused so deeply, so completely, that excellence became your only language. And the beautiful part, you didn't need revenge. You didn't need drama. You just needed patience, focus, and the willingness to outwork every excuse that once tried to hold you back. To build a life no one can touch, you have to stop explaining yourself. Let your work speak. Let your growth shout louder than your frustration. Let your future speak louder than your past. There is strength in not reacting. There is strength in showing up anyway. Most people talk about greatness. Very few are willing to suffer for it. But the ones who are, the ones who can endure silence, judgment, and setbacks without folding, those are the ones who become legends. Those are the ones who inspire without trying, who lead without demanding, because their life is the proof. Their results are the argument. There will always be people who doubt you. Let them. There will always be moments that test your resolve. Pass them. Because every time you keep going, every time you build when it feels pointless, you're stacking bricks, one by one, quietly, steadily, until one day you look up and realize what you've built cannot be denied, not by critics, not by time, not even by your past, Because you didn't just build success, you built character. You didn't just chase wins, you became someone who earns them. And that transformation, that identity, that's what makes you untouchable. That's what makes you unstoppable. They won't see the nights you didn't sleep. They won't see the tears you held back. They won't know the sacrifices you made when it would have been easier to give in. But you'll know. You'll feel it in your posture, in your presence, in the way you walk into spaces and no longer need to explain how you got there. Because the life you built is the explanation. The way you carry yourself is the announcement. You're not here to prove anything. You're here to be everything you said you would be. That's what undeniable looks like. It looks like showing up relentlessly, quietly, powerfully, until even your silence becomes impossible to ignore. You don't build this kind of life overnight. You build it day by day, through decisions no one sees, through habits no one celebrates, through disciplines that bore most people but sharpen the few. You become unshakable when you make peace with repetition. When you show up on the days you don't feel like it. When you hold your standard even when no one's holding you accountable. That's how greatness is built. Not in moments, but in momentum. Not in flashes, but in foundations. You won't always feel proud, but every time you don't quit, you're winning. Every time you push past fear, you're building something permanent. So when you think about the life you want, ask yourself, am I building something they can't touch? Am I working like someone who plans to be unignorable? Because that's the bar now, not just to be successful, but to be so solid, so excellent, so disciplined that even if they don't like you, they can't argue with what you've built. Even if they block you, they can't stop your name from rising. Even if they doubt you, they can't deny your results. That's the life worth building, one that can't be shaken, one that doesn't beg for attention, but commands respect the moment it enters the room. And one day, when they whisper your name in rooms you've never walked into, when they study the ground you've already conquered, when they try to trace your blueprint and still fall short, you'll know it wasn't luck. It wasn't noise. It wasn't chance. It was you. It was every silent battle you fought, every tear you turned into fuel, every lonely night you turned into discipline, every insult you turned into focus. You didn't just rise. You built the rise, and now they can't touch you. Not because you screamed the loudest, but because you stood the longest. You became undeniable. So keep going even when no one claps. Keep building even when no one sees. And keep believing even when doubt screams louder than hope. Because one day, when you stand on everything they said you couldn't build, you won't need to say a word. Your life will speak. And it will speak louder than every voice that ever tried to silence you. God bless you. Thank you for walking this path with resilience, with fire, and with purpose. Stay grounded, stay rising, and stay tuned for more transformational content that will keep pushing you toward the life you were born to create. You're not done yet. You're just getting started.